today is the first thing is thank you for all your prayers for Mateo. He got out of the hospital either a week ago today or Monday. I think it was Sunday that he got out of the hospital. So he's not 100% yet, but he can breathe, which is good. Whereas before he couldn't put together a sentence without coughing, which is interesting because we dealt with that with Austin, and there were months when every day we were doing at least one, if not two, breathing treatments. So he's doing better, but he's not 100%, which is kind of nice because when he is 100%, you're exhausted after an hour with him. So, but obviously don't want him to be in pain or anything. And the second thing was, and this has nothing to do with our lesson today, but I thought it might be an interesting metaphor maybe for you, is with my knee surgery, a couple of things I've learned about life since then, and that is that after about 2 weeks, I started feeling really good, and my bad habits were gone, and I was walking really well, and I wasn't getting full of myself. I was just pretty excited that I was off crutches and doing really well. And then the next week, I learned actually what they did, and my muscles weren't even awake yet, and that they were going to come awake. I was like, whatever. And then the next week, my knees started getting stiffer, and my muscles started coming alive, and they were aching all the time. So, kind of like life, where you think you kind of got a handle on things and you're doing well, and then life comes along and tragedy hits, or you have like a week full of challenges, or just stuff happens. And many times I find myself going back to, it's like I'll swing it, but not because it's a bad habit, because it won't work, even though it did last week. So it's been a serious work in progress, where yesterday it was stiff all day and it hurt a lot. And right now it feels really good. So, like life, where sometimes you have a really good day and you're thinking, man, I'm doing well and I'm killing this, and my prayers are this, that, and the other. And the next day shows up and you can't seem to tie your shoe straight. So, it's been an interesting process, learning thing in that way. What's that? Oh, yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
had no problems the first 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden the soreness started creeping in.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I do 2 exercises twice a day, where I get on a bike and I'll spin, but I don't spin like fully. I stop at the top of each because I can't bend it that much yet. And then I get on the ground, which I don't know if this part matters to you at all, but whenever you get on the ground and you stretch out your legs, and you can stretch it out all the way like you're supposed to, but I've never been able to do that with this one for a whole host of reasons. So when I do that, I do it for anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 minutes, because if I don't get it straight early, like within the first 8 weeks, then I'll never get it. It won't come back. So I've got to do that, and that typically really hurts. So that's to get this full motion going. And sometimes it works really well, and other times I walk away and it hurts for the next 2 hours, which is kind of like life, So we have to be patient and with ourselves, with life, because some days we have good days, some days not so much. So hope that added something to your life and meant something to you, because it's been a really, I don't know if the last time you, nobody actually does this because it may be a little weird, but I've gotten to where stop it. I'll feel my left thigh muscle, and as hard as I tense it, it's just not alive yet. So as I'm doing different things, it's like we're getting there, but give us some time. You just had massive surgery, so chill, which I'm trying to do. Okay. Oh, it is. Yes, yes. You understand that. Yeah. Well, and what's freaking me out is my knee is still twice the size of my other knee, but I look down at my muscle, and it's like we're getting there. Just chill. I mean, they literally put the thing to sleep. They paralyzed my thigh and my hamstring, so it's just now coming back to life. Okay, so looking at I believe we are on. Yes, we ended here. Genesis 20 and verse 3. We talked about Abimelech's dream is a talk with Yahweh. And one of the reasons I wanted us to go through all of this, and specifically this part, is that in this dream that Abimelech has, and remember this is whenever Abram goes into Abimelech's kingdom and lies about Sarah, and he takes Sarah, and then Abimelech has a dream. It's not like Pharaoh, what's actually a talk in Genesis 12. He has a dream. But within the dream, there's this conversation that Abimelech has with Yahweh. So part of the reason I think this is interesting is sometimes as we read through these stories, we read them as like this narrative that's biblical. But if you kind of stop and notice some things and ask some questions, when was the last time you had a dream where you had a conversation in the dream with somebody? Yeah, you have? Okay, okay.
She hits me in her sleep.
She what?
She hits me in her sleep.
Oh, okay. I used to kick. I don't do that anymore. Terry kicked back, so I stopped. I stopped. But there is this conversation that is had between Abimelech and Yahweh, and in this conversation, there's this back and forth, and then Abimelech, as a result of this conversation, reverses course. So gives her back. But again, this point of interest, yeah, Bob.
And he gives them riches.
Yeah.
Yahweh doesn't tell him to do.
Right. True.
Here's your reward for deceiving me.
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting. Now, an interesting thing again is God here connects with Pharaoh, or not here, God connects with Pharaoh through plagues, but he connects with Abimelech via a dream. And that's nothing more than a point of interest. I can't explain it other than it's just an interesting thing. And I'm sure there's a lot there that I'm not noticing or aware of. And then in 26:2, Yahweh appears to Isaac, somewhat the same situation within a dream as well. And then going to Genesis chapter 28, and I may be reading this wrong, but I found this to be a lot less involved than I remember it, or maybe I was just having assumptions. Who knows? So Genesis 28, beginning in verse 12. So verse 11, at sundown he arrived at a good place to set up camp, stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. And as he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven. And he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, stood Yahweh, I believe Yahweh and Adonai in the same word. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac. The ground you're laying on belongs to you. I'm giving it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west, to the west, to the east, That was really a slip. I didn't do that on purpose. To the west and to the east, north and the south, all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you till I have finished giving you everything that I have promised you. Jacob woke up, sure that the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. But he was afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for whatever reason, all the times that I've heard lessons on this and even thought about it, it's a lot more involved than this. This is not what I remember at all. So at the end of the day, what is Jacob's ladder? What is this dream that Jacob has about? Yeah, and his descendants. Yeah, exactly. And that he would protect him and his family wherever he went. So that's what's happening here, and I'm very curious about verse 12, that this stairway that reached from earth up to heaven, and angels, coming up and down this thing, which seems like kind of an allusion to what we find with Jesus in Ephesians, where Jesus speaks in the same, or Jesus doesn't speak this way, but Ephesians talks about the establishment of the church and Jesus being the head of it, giving gifts, angels ascending and descending, all those kind of things. This seems to be an allusion to that, but apparently it's not. Anyway, I just wanted to throw this one out because I always thought it was very different than what it is when I actually sat down and read it. Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Jacob says this is the gate to heaven.
Yeah.
And basically, it is, because it's out of Zion that we are able to, come to Christ, and that all that took place.
Yeah.
Sorry, working in my brain.
Yeah. No, that's what I do as well. And it's also interesting that he comes to Jacob here the same way he came to Abimelech. I'm Yahweh. And Jacob, of course, I don't know, sometimes I feel like that we have this idea, and maybe this is just me, where, God speaks to his people in a certain way. And yet when we find him talking to Abimelech earlier, we also see him talking to Nebuchadnezzar the same way he's talking to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and other, of Abraham's descendants. Same conversations in a lot of ways. The ground you're laying on will be given to your descendants, and there will be lots of descendants. All the nations of the earth will be blessed by your people. I will personally take care of you wherever you are, which is the very same promise that he gives to Abraham and Isaac. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but later on, God's message to his people is consistently, I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the one from generations ago, I'm that same God. I'm that same Yahweh who spoke to them, who is speaking to you now. Now, whatever level, whatever you want to call omniscience and omnipresence and all that, for generations, it's the same God. Bob?
And remember that the whole landscape, if you will, was one of many gods.
Yeah, right.
There were gods of each different country, and some countries had multiple gods. And
Yeah.
so to say, no, this is who I am. I am the God of your fathers.
Right. Yeah, great point.
More sense in that context.
Great point. And here until recently, it just never crossed my mind that both as they were wandering through the wilderness and as they have their different journeys, they are dealing with different nations that are polytheistic. They may not have been as polytheistic as Egypt, but all kinds of gods. much like the world we live in today. Now, they're not as blatant maybe as they were then. But yeah, he comes to these men as Yahweh, as a mono God, mono deity, in terms of just one as opposed to many.
It's basically the same promise stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Kind of pointed out.
yeah. Great point. Yeah, yeah. So what he starts with Abraham, nothing changes with Isaac or with Jacob, and in fact, as that continues. And it still kind of blows my mind what he mentions to Abraham in, what was it, Genesis 15, where, I mean, how would you respond if someone tells you, 100 years from now, your descendants are going to be blessed? Oh, wait a minute, before that, they're going to be in prison for 400 years for something they didn't do. But after that, they're going to be blessed. I don't know if I like that promise or not. I don't know if that.
It's away from me, so it's like, whatever.
Cool, peace out. Let's do this. Notice what Jacob says in verse 16 after this dream. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. Have you ever noticed that phrase? God's here even before I fell asleep, and I wasn't aware of it. I wonder how many times in our lives, and this probably isn't a great connecting of the dots, but we're in situations in our lives where we're asking for God, praying for God, wanting God to take care of us, and we're not even aware that He is taking care of us. It's already happening. We're just not aware of it. We're not connected into the fact that it's already happening, and we should take peace from that. But we're not locked into that yet.
Omnipresent, He is everywhere.
Yeah.
All around
Yeah.
me is holy.
Yeah. That's right. And in fact, it sounds a little trite, but if we don't feel God, it's because we left, not Him. He's always available and ever present for us. All right, so as we now look at Genesis 37, Genesis 37. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks, and he worked with his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things that his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them, and they couldn't say a kind word to him. Before we go on, I don't know how long it's been since you've read this whole saga with Jacob, and in fact, sometime this next year, we're gonna look at Jacob and Laban and that whole situation. But when we look in these situations, and they're Bible stories with Bible characters, and so, but this was challenging. Did you imagine? You have 12 sons by 4 women. And you know that at least one of these women, well, actually 2 of them, were not necessarily by choice. So these 12 brothers, I doubt that it was hunky-dory and they got along and everything was great. And I mean, even outside of how they felt about Joseph because of how Jacob dealt with him. I don't know about you guys, but I know for Terry and I, as we were, thinking about having a family, I just had this visual of what they would be like and what the kids would be like and how it would all work itself out. And that just got totally blown up in terms of what I thought it would look like. Me and my sisters generally got along really well. Now I've learned recently why that's the case, but we did. They were very, very docile people, as was I. So we got along for a variety of reasons. You look at this situation, and it's not like they disliked him and they sometimes didn't get along. I mean, imagine 10 brothers, and they can't stand you. Now, the more we learn about Joseph, Joseph was probably quite arrogant. He knew his standing with Jacob. You know, at that time when they have the patriarchs and what their standing is. So I guess the point is, I don't know if you ever thought about, man, imagine Joseph walking into any room, or even the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah being in the same room, the sons of Leah. I mean, all three of these groups being in the same room together, and possibly the feelings, the possible hatred, however Jacob dealt with them, and not just like as teenagers, but growing up together. Wow. I've never processed that before until now. Very interesting.
Firstborn blessing.
Yeah.
The firstborn of each wife?
Right. Yeah. Well, you would assume it could not be Bilhah or Zilpah because they weren't wives. And yet, you know, I don't know. It's a really good question. What's that?
Joseph.
Yeah, the almost last one born. And I don't know too. We looked at this, I don't know, about a year ago in a class. Have you ever looked at the names of the sons of Jacob and what they meant? They're all negative. They're all like, I was depressed, I was angry, life was terrible. All the names mean something bad. Yeah.
I'm not sure that the firstborn thing meant a lot to Jacob since he stole it from his brother.
Yeah. Very true. Well, you know, I know we know the story, but, you know, imagine as time goes on and the dynamic with Leah and Rachel and how that got processed. And then all of a sudden it's like, man, I'm going to go find another woman to have kids with so I can have more kids. And then the other woman says, well, I'm going to do the same thing. And so she starts having kids. Was it Bilhah or Zilpah that had more? I mean, they're just churning them out. Then this kid, then this kid, then this kid, then this kid. And they're not mixed. I mean, like boys and girls. 12 sons. Yeah. So it's crazy. So anyway, I find that very interesting. And then and one other thing, as long as we're in the weeds here, to remember is the Bible, the Old Testament specifically, in terms of a narrative, was not meant to be, 5 o'clock they woke up and then on Tuesday this happened and Wednesday this happened. These are like narrative blocks of ideas. So you may go from verse 4 to 5 and bypass 60 years or 80 or 100, whatever the case may be. So as we read this as these pocket of thoughts as opposed to, like a calendar type of thing. So Jacob loves Joseph more than any of the other children because he had him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. His brothers despised or hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. Couldn't say a kind word to him. So one day Joseph has a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him, what? More. How do you hate somebody more? So they hated him more. Now I'm curious what the word hated there is, at least that idea in the Hebrew. So imagine him walking in, he's possibly got this real arrogant strut to him, Have you ever thought about what Joseph must have been like? Fully knowing that he's the favorite of his dad. And his dad doesn't really care about the other kids because of, how that whole process came about with Laban. So he walks in, listen to this dream. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. And one other item here, and because I've only got 2 siblings, I'd never thought about that if someone has, like, my brother-in-law is one of 10. If you've got 12 kids, 11 siblings, and you're the youngest, the oldest is probably how old? At least 18, 20 years older. So you've got a pretty massive gap there. So let's say Joseph here is, 17. I've heard that number thrown out. I don't know why that would be the number, but he's 17. So how old what was Reuben the first? Simeon? Reuben? How old would Reuben be? 30. So listen to this dream I had, and he obviously tells him about this dream. Your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before my bundles. And in that culture, to Bob's comment, who generally has the authority, the sway, the all those kind of things? It's not only the older brother, but the older brothers. And of course, then you have, Bilhah's kids and Zilpah's kids, and that whole idea. He comes in here and says, hey, all you people are going to bow low and worship me, bow low before me. So you think you're going to be king, do you? Do you actually think that you will reign over us? They hated him even more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. So if you were to see Joseph in this moment, and we don't have any more than this, but it's likely that he knew where he stood and maybe he kind of flung it out there often. If you saw Joseph in that moment, would you think God is going to use this kid to deliver our family from a famine?
I'd hope not.
Even if he's going to do it, please don't use this kid. He's arrogant and full of himself and all these kind of things. And it really, hopefully, helps us to see, I know it does for me. I don't like the lesson, but it's there. That what I oftentimes see and visualize and view is so cotton-picking limited. And it is so from only my perspective and my vantage point that my faith and my trust, my confidence in God is to take 10 giant steps back and say, I literally have one vantage point. And my vantage point is through my eyes and my perspective, my biases, and God's is not. I need to not even allow. It's not like I'm letting him. I need to trust God's ways and know that whatever he brings about is a part of what he's doing. And I have a hard time doing that. Yeah.
Wasn't Joseph the oldest of Rachel's kids, though?
Yeah.
He was the oldest.
Yeah, he wanted to be. Yes. And thank you for bringing that up, because you would have to ask, well, what was Jacob's deal? Well, if you go back, what would it be, 20 years? Jacob, it's like, look, that's who I wanted in the first place. I can't help that Laban had no scruples. And I had my... No, he didn't. No.
I would feel sorry for him if he hadn't been the scoundrel he was.
Yeah.
Before Laban did that to him.
Yeah.
You reap what you sow.
Yes. Listening to a podcast about the Jacob and Esau saga, and Jacob's name, we always hear about it being heel grabber, and I don't know that process is for us. He's a deceiver. He's a con man. And then when his mom, gets into the game and helps him deceive his daddy on a very serious thing. It's not like he deceives him out of 5 fish he just caught. I mean, very serious stuff. And even here, Jacob cannot get outside of himself and love these other boys. Everything is about Joseph. And so, to your point again, good point. In a lot of ways, we could say that some of this is Jacob's making. Jacob's planted every one of these seeds because he's like, look, all I can think about is Leah. All I can think about is having a kid through her. I don't care about anybody else. And so their hatred for him.
Yeah, Rachel.
What did I say? Rachel. Yeah, Rachel, not Leah. Rachel, yeah.
Interesting, several chapters back in between what we read about Jacob and the dream and then this, God had another dream with Jacob where he wrestled with God and
Yes.
came to Israel. So even though he was
Yes.
sinful,
Yes.
and God used him, and so
Yeah.
that's something that we can take heart in.
Yeah.
To know that God can use us in our poor, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Sinful
Yes.
state.
Yes.
And we do believe.
Yeah, at whatever level. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah, great point. And with that point, we oftentimes kind of fly over some things in the Bible that we find these people that if we were to meet them, we'd be like, man, that's a sketchy dude. Because Jacob possibly very much was. I heard a comment, and you're kind of bringing up this thought in my mind. I heard a comment a while back that if you take the Bible characters and you put them in a secular setting, like very different from Holy Scripture, we would look at them completely different. We wouldn't see them the same way. The only reason we see them as they are is because they are Bible characters. And so we have this bias about them. But if you were to meet Jacob at any given situation, you might think like, I don't like that guy very much. He's a con man. Oh yeah. I'm curious. The Bible doesn't speak to it, I don't think at all. But if you take those 12 out of the Bible and you have this guy that's going to change the world, yeah, I'm going to pick these 12. Well, you're an idiot. Say that again.
Not associate with the Pharisees.
Yeah.
The prostitutes,
Yeah.
the lower
Yeah.
ranking people,
Yeah.
the other religious people probably would just walk away from.
Yeah. And so the third comment is to be really irreverent. If he weren't Jesus, you would think his whole plan was crazy and ridiculous, which is probably what they thought. The guys that he taught, and I don't know if you guys have ever done this study of and I had never thought about it until I was watching a podcast and someone brought it up. The way that the rabbi was chosen wasn't how Jesus did it. You would go and the rabbi would interview you, but through questions. So he would ask questions, and based upon your answer, is that right, Bob? I think it's something like that. The reason I'm asking Bob, but I think he studied this too. Either they would ask questions or the student would ask a question. And based upon the question, the rabbi would then say, yes, you can be my student, or no, you can't. So Jesus, instead of doing that, he went to the people who weren't even interested in being students and said, come and follow me. And so as opposed to going to a place, he mentored them in the ministry that was coming, which was, going out and sharing about the kingdom. So in everything that Jesus did almost, he did it differently. I mean, he really not even cut against the grain. It was like, here's the 5 things you do as a Jewish rabbi, teacher, mentor, etc. And she's like, okay, I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm going to do it completely different. It's not going to make any sense to you people. If you notice, all of his not the miracles, all of his parables that he did, almost all of them, he would tell them, and then the people would go, hey, well, what would they call him? I guess Jesus. Teacher, yeah, teacher, rabbi. Could you come over here? Yeah. I have no idea what you just said. Could you like walk me through that again? That made no sense whatsoever. As opposed to repetitively going through the law again, Jesus just merged so differently, or didn't merge with what was currently happening. Yeah.
When you look at the characters in the Bible, it just shows you that God can use anybody
Yes.
to do his will.
Yes.
Even under
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Which, you can have some very uncomfortable conversations with people if you get into Judas, or you get into even Matthew. I think we have a very different perspective of Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector, and he was probably a tax collector like all the others. So you have these different characters that we don't talk about a lot, because I think we want the Bible to be this, nice, tidy book. But you've got some interesting characters that God does use, and God employs in different ways that we would never be able to consider.
The thing is, everybody throws around this dysfunctional family all the time. You look in the Bible, man, they were totally dysfunctional.
Yes.
Even Jesus'
Yes.
family was,
Yes.
his brothers, as far as related to him, were dysfunctional.
It's interesting on that note that you look at, I think there's 3 different places where, you find them bickering and arguing about Jesus and what he's going to do. And John 7, I think it is, they thought he was a lunatic. And, he's going to mess up our family by the decisions he's making. So, you have all kinds of dysfunction in the Bible, which is a very interesting that God turns that all into, such a glorious salvation for all of man. All right, well, let's close with a prayer. Loving God, we thank you. Father, help us to continue to learn and grow and ask questions and be curious. You will lead us. You will guide us. You will help us and fill us with your ways. Help us to trust and be confident in you. We pray this in the great name of Jesus. Amen.